Good evening and welcome to Coach World TV. My name is Terry Yoffe, and tonight as my guest I have actually a very special guest, Marianne Walsh. Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
You know, Marianne and I were going to do the show last year, and somehow it just didn't work out. And
That's right.
I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to have snagged her right after the summer to come and be on the show. So it's Dr. Marianne Walsh, and Dr. Marianne Walsh is an executive leadership coach, and her company is Walsh Advisors. And Marianne specializes in a lot of cross-culture work, and I'm going to turn it over to Marianne and let her fill in the blanks a little bit.
Sure.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi. I'm delighted to be here this evening. Let me give you a little background as to
Absolutely.
how I became an executive coach.
So how the light bulb went off.
Actually, I started out in education. So education and learning is certainly a high value for me, has always been. It's certainly part of my purpose. I worked and developed a career planning office at a college in New Jersey. And during that time, I got very involved setting up internships with different companies in the New Jersey area for our students. So one thing led to another, and the executives in these organizations started asking me questions about interpersonal skills, how can I be a better listener, and so forth and so on. But that really, that wasn't where it took off, actually. So after my stint as a director of career planning and placement, my husband was assigned to go to London. And I was pregnant with our fourth child. And he called me and said, you know, I've been asked to move to London. And I said, great, my bags are packed. So we moved over there with 4 dogs and 4 kids almost. As soon as the baby was born, we went. And that's when I started taking on individuals who were interested in managing their careers while they were overseas. So it was still a lot of career management work.
Interesting.
Just to back up a little bit, I have a master's in counseling psych. So that orientation has always been very helpful for me. And then I have a doctorate from Columbia University in adult learning. So those 2 credentials certainly have been very important. So in London, I started working part-time with the expat community, not just Americans, but anybody who was working overseas and who really was very concerned about how do I manage my career while I'm living overseas. Now, the interesting thing, what happened was that the cross-cultural piece kicked in.
Sure.
So a successful guy who was working in New York City, doing everything right, is a rising star, gets moved to London and suddenly finds out
Not a rising
that
star
he's not
anymore.
a rising star
anymore.
And he would scratch his head and he'd say to me, Marianne, you know, I don't understand it. I'm doing all the same things I did to be a rising star in New York, and I'm falling flat on my face.
Culture wasn't the same.
Culture wasn't the same. So this guy was working at for a hotel chain. He was the head of it. And his approach when he took over as manager was to introduce change as something that would be very important for this very staid, old-fashioned hotel where the employees had been there for hundreds of years. And he decided to take off his jacket and call them by their first names, slap them on their backs. And
it
these,
didn't quite fit.
These little things weren't so little. And it certainly was the interpersonal skills that he needed to develop, but it had a huge cross-cultural impact. That was the essence of his problem.
When in Rome, do as the Romans do.
That's right. Yeah, well said. Well said. I like that. Yeah. And then my husband, after we were there for about 4 years, he was asked to move to Tokyo. I wasn't so happy to do that initially, so I actually tried to look for a lord and a duke who would like me and 4 kids and 4 dogs but nobody,
Nobody came forth.
nobody came flying to my door.
So off you
So
went.
actually, I waited a year. I stayed behind, and then I did go. So my husband said, "Try it for a year. You'll see how you like it. You know, get on over there." Well, 1 year became two, two became three, and we were there for 11 years.
Wow.
So the kids really grew up there, as you can imagine. And we all are, I would say, quite Asian in our style. I certainly have an appreciation for silence, happy to be as to rather than do. So the cross-cultural piece became even more significant over there.
Interesting.
Because it was very different for Westerners to understand
Absolutely.
the Japanese mentality.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work with clients in Europe, and I have a client who is working. She's Irish, and she's working in Germany. Actually, they have a company there. They were bought by a larger company, and it's interesting to see what she's doing and what she's not doing in a German culture.
Yeah.
And you know how they feel about having someone who's not of their culture, and some of the challenges she's having. So you know, I think that goes with, if you are of one culture and you go to another culture, it's not doing business as usual.
Absolutely. And we have to always be looking at, as a coach, we have to be looking at how does the world show up for our clients. So just to come full circle with my own experience, so the transition to executive coach really took place in Tokyo.
Sure.
Where I was working with companies, and mainly Western companies, and then a lot of the people who were working there, and also some of their families. So when we came back here, it was very easy for me to segue into executive coaching for foreign subsidiaries with the specialty of understanding the cultural impact of doing business. So I do a lot of work in Japanese companies who are here. And it's this is a cute story. I have just finished a coaching assignment in a Japanese company where I've been working for a year with the general manager, who's Korean, but he's been here since he was in high school, and he's in his 50s. And he brought over a young Japanese manager, rising star, to be in his sales group. And they decided, the group decided that they would, his name is Suzuki, that they would give Suzuki an American name so that he would feel more a part of. And they were said to him, "Now that you're here, we're going to call you Ted."
From Suzuki?
It's like breaking all the rules, you know. Well, the interesting thing is, as Americans, you know, we want to be informal, and we want people to fit in, and we want everybody to be equal.
Yeah.
And Suzuki said in the group, in front of me, he said, "I prefer to be called Suzuki." And so he pushed back on that. That really wasn't what he wanted to do. And certainly the Westerners were very well-meaning.
Yeah.
But the interpretation of that by Suzuki was negative.
Right. It's, you know, it's certainly when we coach, it's all in the interpretation and the communication. And here was two sets of mindsets where one with the Americans were being welcoming, come in, we want to, you know, hopefully you'll take on an American name. And he did a pushback because that wasn't what he wanted. You know, instead of maybe doing what a coach does, so Suzuki, how do you feel about, you know, the idea of a American name?
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying we would like to.
That's exactly right. And then in another company, Japanese company, I met with the boss of my coachee, who is Haitian, a Haitian woman, working in a Japanese manufacturing subsidiary here. And we were talking about, he and I, Nishiwaki-san and I were talking about feedback, and I could see him get very, non-verbally, get very upset. And he said, you know, feedback, very difficult. Very difficult.
Yeah.
Japanese don't like feedback.
Yeah. Confrontation.
It's confrontational,
right.
can be
Exactly.
perceived as that, and certainly loss of face,
Exactly.
giving bad news or the perception of bad news. So, you know, we had to talk about that in terms of a learning opportunity for her, that it would be helpful if he, in fact, gave her some of his thoughts. So we spent a lot of time on shifting that to learning rather than feedback.
Yeah, it's I think it's a slippery slope in a lot of cases, because I also coach internationally with individuals, and I had one guy that this particular company, again, company based in Germany, German guy was going to do some coaching, and they told him he wanted a German coach, and they told him, you have to talk to Terry first. They, you know, part of the mix, and he did not want to. He didn't want to, no way, work with me. He wrote me this long email, you know, alpha male type person, and we talked on the phone. I said, let's just have a phone conversation, and then I sent him back an equally alpha male email, and we had a phone conversation, and we did great together.
Good.
He was thrilled to work with me.
Good.
But it was, you know, just getting to take that step.
But it sounds like his boss or the company pushed that for you.
They told him I needed to be one of the people. They wanted him to work with me. He would, you know, bristled about the concept. But, you know, even coaching, when you coach somebody of a different culture, whatever it is, you have to be mindful, I think.
Yeah, very mindful.
Of who you're coaching, and, you know, what might be different in the kind of, even the way you speak, the kind of language you use. I mean, I'm prone to all kinds of words in my coaching. So, you know, I have to ask permission. Is it okay if I say bleep or whatever, just because I don't want to offend anyone? So it's a very interesting arena, cross-cultural coaching. And after being in London and being in Tokyo and coming back, I'm sure that has certainly, those years abroad have helped you in working in this arena, you know, not being in Tokyo, not being in London anymore, or has it?
Well, I think the actual coaching style is a blend of Eastern and Western thinking.
Interesting. So how does that come across? How does that show up for you?
Well, first of all, the whole notion of non-attachment as an Eastern philosophy, very Buddhist, whereas Westerners are very attached to possessions.
Okay, I thought you were talking about the coaching.
No, no, but just in terms of my style or my philosophy, I always feel that as human beings, we're always in the process of becoming. I see people, I like to think of myself as defined as who I am rather than my work.
Right.
I'm more interested in wholeness rather than parts. I think Western thinking is more about parts. So how does that play out? The whole concept of whole, if you will, in coaching is that I'm interested in all of you.
The whole person, the whole being.
Yes.
Exactly.
I like to say to clients, you know, you don't come to me in a little box, but in the fullness and richness of your lives.
Right.
So, but I wanted to go back to something you said about that company really insisting that he speak with you. I'm working in another Japanese company with 4 other coaches, all males. I'm the only female, and it's a group experience. The reason that the 4 guys are there is because the male employees would not have a female coach. And I, as the female, have a female employee. And that thinking, you know, I'm going to have a conversation. You've kind of given me some incentive to talk to the HR gentleman who's American, to be thinking a little bit more broadly and to encourage the next round of employees for coaching to consider someone of the opposite sex. You know, that it's a good learning experience to do that.
That's interesting, because I would imagine that there are female clients that only want female coaches, or vice versa, you know, males that only want male coaches. I guess it's like therapy. People go to therapy and they only want a male therapist or a female therapist. You know, they have a proclivity and a propensity towards someone they're comfortable with, that they which could be. We'll get to that whole idea of your thinking process of a belief.
Yes. I also truly like the idea that a company will encourage, after selecting a group of coaches from which to choose, that the coachee makes his or her own selection, so that there are two people put forward with equal credentials.
Right.
That the company says, hey, these 2 people are great. Now you make the decision, because then you have ownership for it.
Exactly.
And in this situation with, in this Japanese company where there are 5 of us, the HR person selected the coach, the coaches for each employee. So there was a lot of control there.
That's like third party.
Yeah,
you
a
know,
lot of
how
control.
it's like, how does the HR person know what would bring the most value to the client, and just go, okay, Joe's being lined up with Harry, or, you know, that type of thing.
So in that engagement, I'm spending time educating the HR director, who I'm very fond of, because this is his first experience with coaching.
Sure.
He wants to do it right. He's gotten blessing from Tokyo to do this. It seems that coaching is catching on in Tokyo, in Japan, a lot.
Right. Yes.
So a lot of my time is spent consulting very, very softly and gently with him, because he doesn't know what he doesn't know for the next round.
Right. And here's an example, I think, of somebody who doesn't know what he doesn't know, trying to match people up.
Exactly.
Who he doesn't know who he doesn't know.
Right.
He's not proficient at it.
Right.
And instead of having the coachees get a chance to meet and talk with the coaches. And then, you know, I think when you sit in front of somebody, you can get a much better experience of who they are and a feeling. So you can say, gee, you know what, I really liked, I didn't think I wanted a woman coach, but after sitting and talking with Mary Ann, I really think I'd like to do that. So there was no choice. Choice was taken away from them.
Right, right. So now, having said that, the coaching is going very, very well, and the 5 of us have conference calls every other week, and we share our coaching experience, which is new for me. I'm not normally in a situation like that.
Interesting.
Where we have, it's peer supervision, if you will, and I'm absolutely delighted with that. So all the coaches are getting very high marks from the coachees and also from HR. So
very nice.
It's working out well.
That's
shall
great.
We say.
So we talked about something that caught my eye, or my ear, when we had dinner, about this whole concept of thinking pad, was it? Thinking
path.
Path, thank you.
Thinking path.
Okay, I had part of it right. I had
That's
the PA
right.
right.
No, that's good. You know, I was talking about
So
I took a cognitive behavioral therapy course and was thinking about that and applying some of the concepts to coaching. And it's a very simple piece of paper that I put in front of the client, and it has 4 words on it: thinking, feelings, action, result. So it helps to give structure to looking at how your thinking drives emotions,
Of course.
feelings, how those feelings determine actions and results. So if we can, if we're looking at transformational coaching, coaching that's going to stick, you know, for example, we want to change the thinking. That's where we want to work on. And what are the assumptions? What are the beliefs
Stories
that
that I love to say.
Stories.
Yeah.
What are the stories that
they come up with, right?
And if you think about, so this model is working very well for people then to say to me, okay, I'll ask them to journal for 2 weeks and write down when they were having a very good experience and then one that wasn't so good. So let me give you an example.
Sure.
I'm working with an American manager of an IT group. The IT group happens to be 3 Chinese women who've been with the company for more than 10 years, and an Iranian and an Indian, 2 gentlemen. So they're little United Nations, and they're not getting along so well. That's another story. Okay, so my task in talking to the manager is to, the morale of the group is very low.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues. So he is, I love him, his name is Gary, and he's incredibly open to be helped. He is American, he comes from a military background, so that's a little bit of an orientation there. So I sat with him and his group, shadowed him for 3 hours the other day, and listened to how he spoke to his people. So,
Military-like?
Yeah. How'd you guess? What was that clue? So he said the COO was in and gave them lots of praise for they're doing a big migration system of all their IT stuff, making it more global, and they are a global company. And so I could see everybody picked up as a German COO, and incredibly handsome, and everybody I could see was just rising to the occasion. So we were improving morale just by his presence. So he leaves the room, and Gary says, well, we're really happy that the COO was thrilled, but why didn't you talk more about the migration, and why didn't you give better numbers than what you said? That was awful. So you could see their faces go down.
They took a great experience and
so
imploded.
So I asked him privately, what was he thinking about? You know, what motivated him to say that? And his thinking was, in the military, you know, my leader, my commander, always would point out something negative because you couldn't, his thinking, Gary's thinking, is you can't improve unless you hear something negative. So he's constantly pointing out all the negative stuff. So what happens is, you know, the action is not so hot, that people deteriorate and go back to having mopey faces.
Yeah, so I hope you're working with him on how to keep the morale up and, you know, kind of couch what he has to say in a way, kind of reframe what he has to say in a way that's energizing, that's can be a challenge, because we all love challenges to get to the next level, but if it's a downer, that's very different.
And the other thing is, I'm working with a Chinese woman who, one of the mandates is the comment from her boss is she needs to be more approachable. So we could work on the surface of life, and we could talk about how to be more approachable, maybe stand a little closer, whatever, nonverbals. But I thought, well, let's do this thinking path, and I wanted to understand better why people are perceiving her as not being approachable. So I asked her I sat in with her also, and her thinking is that most of the people who in this company, she's new to the company, are really dumb.
Dumb?
Dumb. Not smart. Not as smart as she is.
Oh, she's the smartest one in the room.
Right. So that's her thinking. The feeling is that she is irritated when you say something that she thinks is stupid.
Right.
Now, so that's the feeling. The action that she took the other day in a meeting was to say, Terry, you're really stupid, in front of all of her colleagues.
She said that?
She said that.
To a person?
She said it right in the middle of the meeting. Didn't come over too well. And so the results are that we have a problem now with people not wanting her, not even approachable. Forget that. They don't want to be near her.
Well, yeah, so she needs to...
So we have to change the thinking.
Right.
So that's a task.
So it's very interesting. We've got a couple of minutes left. Can you believe we've got, like, I think 2 minutes left? This is also fascinating. It really is. And very quickly, I had a client who was actually from London, who was here, worked for a really big company, and did great at her job, great. However, her behavioral, she got called on the carpet for her behavioral issues. Didn't get along with anybody. So she came to me scared because she didn't want to get let go. And within 2 coaching sessions, she started to understand exactly what was going on. And within 6 months of the time we coached, her nemesis became her best friend.
Wow.
So,
that's
it's
a great story.
Pretty powerful in what we can do in the coaching. I mean, we could go on, and we've got only, I don't know, half a minute left, believe it or not.
Wow.
I told you it would fly by.
It has flown by. I can't believe it. Wow.
So before we leave, I wanted to say thank you so much for today, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed having you.
Thank you. I've loved it.
We have another second if you'd like to give a website.
My website is www.mariannewalsh.com.
There you go. And I want to thank everybody for coming here and listening to us. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you at another time.